Hi, and welcome to this next Tarot Masterclass. Hopefully, you've been enjoying the course so far, and we're going to shift things up a gear as we start to talk about the next series of cards. So, this is session 13, and the two cards we're going to look at are Lust and Justice. I'll explain more in a moment. But up until this point, you've been looking at the cards, the first 11 minor cards, that is the Fool and the cards 1 through 10. And as I kind of mentioned, and you'll read in the text, that the cards 1 through 10 form a cycle in and of themselves. They're part of what we could consider to be the Fool's journey. And that's the way I choose to look at this. It's kind of like our journey through these various stages and the cards. So when you get to the wheel, the card 10 in the cycle, there is the possibility of going back to the magician and doing that whole cycle again. And with some things in your life, you'll be doing that. I like to think about that as the conscious journey, the practical, I won't say mundane, but more like the journey through the conscious mind and that realm. If you choose to go on the second series of uh, cards, the journey takes you or takes the Fool from the conscious mind to the unconscious mind. And that's where some of the deep stuff lies, and some of the, shall we say, the most well-known images in the tarot exist after this crossing point of the 10 cards. So recap that journey 1 through 10, and of course 0, and also think about the journey you've been on with the minor arcana. Now we're going to come back to the minor arcana, but the thing I want you to hold on to here is that the minor arcana are elemental, earth, air, fire, water, representations of the major cards. And just hold on to that. And as this course progresses, we'll explore it more and more. But now we're into Lust and Justice. So as I say, within the wheel, we've completed a cycle of cards. There's the conscious mind, and we're going to go with the Fool now, journeying into the unconscious mind. And we're going to see a Crowley weight switch here, some movements of cards. And the thing I want you to remember is that you are the Fool in all of this. It is the Fool that takes the journey. Okay. If we look at the Waite Smith cards and the Crowley Pamela Harris, Frida Harris cards, you'll see that some of the names are different. You know, the magician becomes the magus, the high priestess becomes the priestess. Strength at number 8 is actually lost, okay, at number 11. The Wheel of Fortune actually becomes fortune. Justice at number 11 actually is actually the card that we've looked at previously, which is adjustment. It's the equivalent of the card at number 8. And then temperance and art and judgment and aeon. And the world, the universe, we'll talk about those when we get to them. But these are the key changes. And as we spoke about at card 8, whereas Pamela Coleman Smith and Arthur Waite put strength at number 8, you'll find that Crowley put adjustment at number 8, and the adjustment card bears a striking similarity to the Justice card that's at number 11 with the Waite Smith deck. And likewise, the Lust card that's at number 11 bears a similarity to the Strength card at number 8. You'll see more of that in a moment. There are reasons why these switches were made, and we'll look at that at a later date. They have a lot to do with trying to make the correspondences work, especially the correspondences to do with the Kabbalah. Again, that's for a lot later. Just now, get your head around the fact that the Waite Smith deck has a slightly different order to the Crowley Harris deck. Now, you become very practiced at looking at the cards, I hope, and I'm not going to therefore repeat the screens that we've had on previous conversations. But the things that you are attuned to looking at are the colors, what's in the foreground, what's in the background, the characters and the actions. All right. That sort of observations still carry forward, and it is important to make sure you do those observations and keep your notebook and journal to hand. So I'm going to change things up just a little bit for the next series of cards because I don't want you to become staid in the way that we're looking at things. So here's Justice, number 11 on the left, and here's Lust, number 11 on the right. And the thing I want us to focus on for this part of the journey is the story that the cards seem to be telling. Now, in this short video introduction, I can only point a few things out. Hopefully the text will indicate other ways and places for you to go. And I'm going to suggest a few things for you to look at as we go forward. Okay, so Justice. This is the Waite Smith deck. Justice. We have to ask ourselves, who is this character? Well, it could be a man, it could be a woman, but it's a seated, throned character. They're holding a sword pointing upwards and a set of scales pointing downwards. They're between two pillars, and there is a curtain behind them. The background is yellow. Remember, yellow is air in particular, but the greyness of the stone suggests that this is actually kind of like a formal setting. Who do they remind you of? Well, surely there's a call back here to the image of the high priestess. There's a call back to the image of the magician. And you will see other callbacks if you choose to look at them. I will say at this stage, it is well worth looking at these new cards and holding them as reflections against the first 11 cards, the first 10 cards we looked at. I'll put the Fool aside for a moment. All right. Look at the objects they're holding. Well, it's a sword, there's a balance, a weighing scales, a red formal robe with green over the top, and it's the two grey pillars. And so what's the story here? Well, it looks like a king or a queen, a youngish person, is sitting in judgment of a situation. They're trying to bring balance and justice. Unlike the justice character that we see in our criminal courts, it's not blindfolded. So this person is fully aware of what's before them. And if we look back at the Crowley card that's equivalent to justice, which is adjustment, we can see some of the motifs there cropping up. Remember, adjustment is the Crowley, Smith, and Harris card for number 8, but they're equivalent cards. So once you've made up what the story is, it's a question of you looking at these cards. Now, as with all of the tarot cards, you can take them at face value, all right? But often the idea is to look beyond that. So if we've come to justice and the card before it was the wheel, what does justice imply? Well, surely if we take the word justice out of the context of law courts, we're looking at here about weighing things up, having things in balance. And we're going to balance that situation before we take a leap into the dark side, our own dark side, our unconscious. So you can only approach the next stage of the journey when you yourself feels balanced. And the adjustment card says something similar, but way, way back. Okay, it says, the adjustment card sort of says way back that once you've actually made the movement of the chariot, made the commitment, made the movement of the chariot, you need time to adjust, and therefore it leads into the hermit for reflection. But this is a different level of justice, sorry, a different level of reflection. We can see the clear link here between justice and high priestess. The high priestess is sitting between two pillars, and she's the gateway to the mysteries. And the justice card, whoever that character is sitting between pillars, which lead further. And Arthur Waite says in the pictorial key to the tarot, the pillars of justice open into one world and the pillars of the high priestess into another. If you remember back to when we looked at the high priestess, this was about moving forward into some kind of initiation and through the veil. Here, we've been initiated, but we're moving from one world into another world, as I've suggested, moving from the conscious realms to the unconscious realms. Hope that is making sense. Lust, well, this one is a very vibrant card. Remember, this card is Crowley and it's Frida Harris, and the imagery is very, very dark and stark. It has a naked female character riding on the back of a lion. The lion has 7 heads. She appears to be holding some kind of chalice, which is radiating into the universe and maybe collecting from the universe. The tail of the lion actually has this head with the stars on, and you can look that up. But what is interesting here is the woman who is riding, and there is a sort of Freudian link there, is riding this particular lion, actually is holding it with silk reins. She is still in control, even though she looks like she's riding it with gay abandon. So who is the character? Well, she's a lady that appears to be fully in control of her sexuality. Who do they remind us of? Well, come on to that in a moment. What are they doing? Well, they're sipping ecstasy from the universe, and they're controlling this 7-headed lion. They're holding a chalice, a uterus perhaps, chalice, and they're holding silken reins that are keeping the lion in check. And so what's the story here? Well, it's somebody that actually initially appears not to be in control, but actually is. They're letting themselves experience the ecstasy of the moment. Now, if we compare it to the strength card back at number 8 of the Arthur Waite, Pamela Collins-Smith deck, you can see there's a complete change of the female imagery here. In the strength card, the female actually is, shall we say, saintly, virginal, or holy, and she's controlling the beast within with gentle touches. Not so Crowley and Frida Harris's Lust card. She is going for it. I can't think of a better way of putting it, but she is maintaining her faculties and as well enjoying that kind of sensuality that goes with it. I think one of the things that Arthur Waite, in particular, and maybe Pamela Coleman-Smith as the artist, played down some of the ecstasy and some of the sexuality and sensuality that are embedded in these cards. So what was it really saying? Well, remember, we're starting our journey from the conscious mind to the unconscious mind, and we need to do that by embracing all parts of ourselves, not simply by, by controlling everything, but by actually allowing that side of ourselves to grow. Now, if you've read any Crowley, you will know that he was all for this, letting the inner self out. He was called the wickedest man in the world because at the time he was saying this, the idea of free love and sexual liberation was a little bit of a taboo thing. Bring Crowley into the 60s, he would have been right at home, right? But he wasn't for his time, and so people looked down upon this. But Crowley, and in particular those who followed Crowley in the Thelema, the which was the temple and the practice that he of magic that he created, if you like, they were all for embracing every aspect of ourselves, our passionate, sensual, erotic side, as well as our ability to be restrained. And that's what lust is showing here. And if you are going to go on this journey into the deep part of your unconscious mind, you need to be fully aware of the motivations that drive you and the fact that you can actually control them as well as give yourself over to them. Remember, one of Crowley's famous statements is, about will and the fact that, the fact that the law being will and love under will. And if you don't know that reference, I suggest you dig it up and have a look. But I know we've talked about it before. But this is the essence of this card. It is fiery. It is reds and oranges. It's obviously Leo in terms of its fire sign, in terms of its astrology. And again, these are the correspondences we need to look at. As you drill down into this card, you will see other things. What are the discs behind the character? What are they meant to be showing? What about the faces beneath the lion? Are these people that are not willing to allow themselves to experience their sensuality, experience life in its dark and its light senses? One of the things I find interesting is that the strength card here on the right, not only it lacks the energy, it's a very passive card, even though the infinity symbol above the head suggests that this person is in touch with the cosmos and the divine. I really like Crowley and Harris's depiction of lust here, because for me, it captures far more than the weight Pamela Coleman Smith card does. Now, the seven heads are really interesting. The beast is being ridden by this woman, and the seven heads are said to represent the head of an angel, the head of a saint, the head of a poet, the head of an adulterous woman, the head of a man, valor, the head of a satyr, and the head of a lion or serpent. And that's interesting. That really is almost multiple facets of humanity represented in that seven-headed lion. And that's like us. We all wear these masks at different times. And sometimes we are afraid to be the saint or the poet or the adulterous woman engaging as we want to in our lust or sensual pleasures. We can be brave. We can be duplicitous. So it's important that this seven-headed beast that's being ridden, this woman is a strong woman in control of all those facets of herself. Yeah. Here, Crowley makes a specific link to Babylon. And now, we need to just explore this briefly, Babylon. Often the reference is known as the whore of Babylon. And if you just take that word whore, which is a very powerful word, and apply it to that card, you can actually see why this image could be seen as being quite shocking, especially if you're of a more reserved nature. Now, Babylon, as it's referred to in the Bible, seems to be a mixture of all these powerful feminine pagan goddesses, many who wore sacred crowns and robes and held a cup. And they were very powerful. I mean, Demeter, Sibyl, Ishtar, and Isis, they're goddesses with power. And it could be argued that these female women of power is something that the church didn't want. In fact, without taking too much of a detour, many of the women in the Bible are actually subservient. We know from some of the Gnostic Gospels and some of the writings that seem to have been ignored by the church, that Mary Magdalene wasn't actually this whore, wasn't exactly the promiscuous Mary Magdalene, the sinful woman. She may have been much more. And there is something to explore. If you've seen the Da Vinci Code as the film, or if you've read The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail, you may have different insights about who this Whore of Babylon was. Um, Again, without pushing too much, the spelling of Babylon comes from the 1500s when John Dee and Edward Kelly were working, channeling, if you like, their insights. Now, John Dee kind of is one of my heroes in many respects. He was a polymath. He was a scientist, a mathematician. He was involved with navigation. He was a diplomat, and he was an occultist. But of course, in those days, there was no such thing as an occultist. They were all natural philosophers, and nothing was out of bounds in terms of knowledge. It's when that knowledge became suppressed and people said that some knowledge is good, some knowledge is bad, that we got caught up into this, shall we say, forbidden, occult, esoteric wisdom that has been so frowned upon by certain religious organizations. But here's the thing. At the time the Bible was compiled, the idea of prostitution in particular, both male and female prostitution, was something that was kind of shunned upon because sexual relationships, in biblical times, they were seen as not just about love and lust, they were seen about other kinds of things to do with status, other kind of things to do with commitment, other kind of things to do with, shall we say, more formalized relationships. Um, if you remember your biblical stories, Mary, the mother of Jesus, was betrothed to Joseph. That didn't mean they weren't married, but it did mean they weren't married, but they were actually more than just engaged. Betrothal actually meant living almost as man and woman in those days. So Babylon, the whore of Babylon, becomes this archetype of everything that is evil, if you like, everything that the Bible and the more, shall we say, no, the less honest religions, and I mean honest because human beings, we are passionate, lustful people, um, was something that should be seen as sin, and rather than something that should be celebrated and managed and controlled or explored. So the Whore of Babylon became this representative of everything that was evil, the Whore of Babylon. However, as I already said, it's better to think in terms of that this Babylon woman, this lustful woman, is a nurturing and virtuous being like an earth goddess. And that is the sense in which Crowley wrote about the Whore of Babylon or the Scarlet Lady. Um, she was the goddess of ecstasy and fertility and not shying away from that natural role of sex, of lust, of the deeper, more unbalancing passions. In fact, it could well be argued that when we don't accept this sort of sensual side of ourselves and learn to balance it, if we repress it, that causes more debt problems than by expressing it. And again, if you're into your Jung or your Sigmund Freud, we know about repression of the impulses and paranoia and all that kind of stuff. So, in terms of the tarot cards and the journey, we are learning to become more of ourselves and the best of ourselves and managing to control pieces, are parts of ourselves that, if they were given free rein, would make us unbalanced. Which brings me to another point. Why are you doing this course? In fact, if you're also following the occult course, why are you doing it? I shall tell you what I think is important about it, but you can disagree. And you may be doing it for all kinds of other reasons. But one of the things that I like to think is that any study of the occult, and for me, tarot is a way of getting into the study of the occult, is actually a philosophical exploration of your own place within the cosmos. And it seeks to look at the labels and the boundaries that we put up against ourselves and our connection to the divine. In many ways, the true occultist isn't after power, external power. They're after understanding themselves and giving themselves internal power, and therefore allowing their will to create magic because they understand themselves and maybe accept themselves too. So, occultism or Gnosticism or the esoteric is actually the art and science of personal alchemy. You can disagree with me, and you're more than welcome to. But that's the reason I don't necessarily see the tarot as a fortune telling tool, because the fortune telling bit, if you like, the reading for other people, which is a much better way of putting it, even though I don't like the word reading, as you know, the consulting with other people with the tarot stems out of your ability to use the tarot for yourself, not the other way around. You don't consult with other people to learn the tarot. And I know that's going to fly in the face of some who actually want to learn the tarot so they can become readers, fortune tellers, or psychic consultants. That's secondary to this whole journey, because this whole journey is about you. Yeah. Okay. There's a lot there, but there's a lot more in the text for you to pick up on. And I think it's well worth you exploring that. One of the things I will bring to your attention, which I think is great, is there's a wonderful description of the Scarlet Woman or the Whore of Babylon in the book of Revelation. And there is a woodcut from a 1500 Martin Luther's Bible. It's a woodcut that's been coloured, but can you actually see the similarity between that woodcut and Crowley's Frieda Harris's Lust? Here, the beast with the tail, the dragon's tail, she is being ridden by probably a female pope, but a papas, and she's actually coming in now. The idea to beguile the people, yeah. In biblical revelation, the Whore of Babylon precedes the final coming of the Antichrist and Judgment Day. But I see this as actually more a personal discovery of laying bare your soul and looking at yourself honestly, warts and all, right? Because we all have our internal warts, our internal abominations, which if we let run freely will control us rather than us controlling it. Heck, I just realised there's a lot for you to think about there. And so maybe that's where I'll leave you until next time. Next month, we're going to look at the Hanged Man. Back to cards being numbered the same and having the same broad definition. What's the Hanged Man about? Well, think about it. Think about it for a moment. And this is the bit that's maybe maybe will worry you a little bit in the nicest possible way. If we've done the journey and we've actually met lust or justice and become balanced and know ourselves, understand ourselves, the next step is self-sacrifice. It's letting go of everything we thought we believed in order to make room for new things. I'll leave that with you until next time.